Hey YouTubers, this is the Gold Standard 0924 coming at you with Chapter 5 in my Wrestling Reimagining series for you guys today. I'll be continuing to restructure the landscape of WWE in 2006. For today's video, I'll be tackling the Raw exclusive pay-per-view event known as Backlash. Now, I have 7 matches that I booked on this particular pay-per-view card, and basically this pay-per-view was held just a couple weeks after WrestleMania. So I only have about 4 weeks to build up between from WrestleMania over here in the Backlash. But what I would have on here to open up the show would be a Fatal 4-Way match for the Women's Championship. Mickie James, who won the women's title from Trish Stratus at WrestleMania, she will still be the champion going into this event and defend the belt against Trish, Lita, and Victoria. Now, how do we get to where we ended up being? So, Mickie James, she's been the women's champion, and Trish Stratus is feeling humiliated after what happened at WrestleMania, where Mickie James completely grabbed Trish's private parts and completely embarrassing her in front of the Chicago crowd, much to the chagrin of Trish Stratus. Now, as far as Lita's role in this title contention is concerned, she has her history with Trish Stratus, which the announcers will let it be known. Lita had been out of in-ring competition for a whole year back in 2005. She had to get sidelined due to an ACL injury, and even when she was injured, there was just so much that was going on that year, with the dirt sheet spreading out involving her cheating on Matt Hardy in favor of Edge, and that was basically the talk of the town, and that ended up being a big feud that would go on throughout the summer of 2005. So Lita has been siding with Edge throughout most of that year. Going into 2006, by this point, Lita is 100% in complete health, and she is able to return to in-ring competition. Now, Lita, especially after now that her boyfriend Edge is still the WWE champion going to Backlash, she figures why not try and capitalize on that success rather than just being the woman that's kind of looked at as Edge's girlfriend. So Lita is willing to get back in that title contention and hopes to reclaim the women's championship. And she hasn't really had a proper women's title rematch because of that injury that she sustained. And she's willing to take that opportunity to win back the women's title. Now, Victoria's role is particularly interesting because she was a heel going to 2006. But there was animosity going on earlier that year between her and Mickie James. At New Year's Revolution, Victoria ends up winning the gauntlet match to earn a title shot at the Royal Rumble. But that also came with the expense of utilizing dirty tactics. So Victoria, she fights the then champion Trish Stratus at the Royal Rumble. Mickie James served as a special referee. She felt like she was cheated out of that title opportunity, so Vince McMahon stuck her as the special referee role. Now, Trish ended up retaining the Women's Championship, and because of Mickie James's officiating the match and her involvement as well, she ended up doing the fast count, which really kind of infuriated Victoria since she has her tactics used against her. Victoria had an alliance going on with Tori Wilson and Candice Michelle. Basically, they had a bit of falling out going into WrestleMania where Tori and Candice were fighting over the cover of the Playboy magazine. Victoria decided not to have any part of it, that she just doesn't want to hear the two of them bicker, so she ends up walking out on both Tori Wilson and Candice Michelle. Now, this didn't happen in actuality. That's just something I kind of made up for the sake of building up to this card. So Victoria is basically, by this point, a woman of her own country. So Victoria is not necessarily all the way heel at this point, but she isn't all the way babyface either. So it kind of makes her a tweener to summarize at that. And she's also willing to go after the women's championship rather than having to be involved in the fiasco between her former stablemates at this point, since she walked out on them. Now, this would be a fatal four-way match for the women's championship that I would open up for Backlash. Now, it turns out that even in the actual match that Trish Stratus was involved at some point she ended up spraying her right arm, and then they ended up having sort of a disqualification that cut the match abruptly. But even if Trish ended up getting injured regardless, I would still have the match continue on as scheduled, even if the referee ends up bringing Trish Stratus backstage to require medical attention. And the thing with accidents is that, we don't necessarily expect stuff like that to happen. So even if it was something that was inevitable and that it was unexpected, I could still continue the match with Lita and Victoria trying to carry on with the women's title match. And basically it's going to end with a debuting Beth Phoenix. She started to debut around this time. She was in OVW, the developmental territory for WWE at that time. And I figured this would be a good opportunity to bring her in as a Mickie James's bodyguard. The announcers put it over. It's like, who is this particular woman and why is she interfering in the match? Kind of make it seem like this is like a random fan attack, like you would see during like very rare occasions where out of script where you have like a random fan from the audience would come out and try to get involved in a particular television match. We try to kind of put it over, and the announcers aren't sure is like why the fan is attacking either Lita or Victoria, and she's gonna end up helping Mickie James to retain the women's championship. The ending of the match will definitely have people, basically having people talk about the next night on Raw and the several weeks going forward. So Beth Phoenix makes her in-ring debut, or I guess you say televised debut, and she's going to help out Mickie James in retaining the women's championship. Now we fast forward also into our third match, which will have Eugene taking on Shane the Hurricane Helms. Now this would be a match where Matt Striker, as far as his role is concerned, he had already debuted at this time. But I want to actually package Matt Striker a bit differently as opposed to being the teacher, but he will be instead a case manager for Eugene, someone who provides special needs treatment. And Eugene was particularly that character. Now, Eugene, at this point in his career, he's kind of been all alone for the most part. He's been in solitude. His uncle Eric Bischoff, who had been the general manager of Monday Night Raw, had been fired by Vince McMahon. His mentor, William Regal, is now on SmackDown, so it kind of really leaves Eugene kind of all by himself, and he's just a man without a country, I guess you could say. But Matt Striker is brought in to be Eugene's case manager. He is basically doing all he can to provide Eugene with the best care and comfort that he could possibly provide him with. Now, Shane Helms, on the other hand, he is basically at this point steering away from the superhero aspect of his character. He's kind of more of a brooding street fighter, take no prisoner sort of attitude that he's been having since the beginning of the year. He's been kind of decking out all that superhero outfit in favor of kind of more of a mixed martial arts based character and persona, however you want to put it. He's dressed up in all these he's got the leather gloves, he's got the loose short tights, He's got a mouthpiece. The fundamentals of who you would expect when you're dressed up, ready to go at it during an MMA fight. Just basically that kind of attire that he would have. Shane Helms has just been kind of more, like I said, a very brooding character and someone that just doesn't really like to make friends, and he's kind of more of a bully. It's just kind of what I'm trying to say here. And Eugene is someone that really looked up to the Hurricane because he was his favorite superhero. He was someone that he looked up to. And now he's kind of wondering exactly is why Shane Helms or the Hurricane is not the man that he once was. Shane would go on to respond to Eugene that the Hurricane died a gruesome death and now has become everyone's living nightmare. This kind of leaves Eugene verbally assaulted by the likes of Shane Helms. Eugene is just bursting into tears. He ends up confining himself all alone in the locker room. Matt Striker, being Eugene's case manager still, is providing a bit of a pep talk with Eugene and influencing him into thinking that when it comes to role models, they aren't always who they seem they are. Striker quotes Eugene, "There's always a silver lining between good and evil. For instance, a person with a bad reputation may have warm quality traits that make them seem like they aren't all that bad in the world. But for every good person in the world, there's always going to have a dark side to them. The Hurricane as you know him for is a perfect example of that demonstration. All I'm saying, Eugene, is that when it comes to idolizing someone you look up to, you have to be careful who you trust." So Eugene takes his advice to heart, and it gets to by the time we get to the go home show to Backlash, we see Eugene unleash a fury that we've never seen in him before, even going out his way to ambush Shane Helms backstage later that night. And that's how we get to where we have here for Backlash. Matt Striker, being in Eugene's corner, is going to provide some advice and expertise on how to beat Shane Helms. And despite Matt Striker's assistance, it just kind of leads to a sort of a miscommunication that costs Eugene the advantage in the match and allows Shane Helms to defeat Eugene by nailing him with the Shining Wizard. 1, 2, 3. Shane Helms goes over Eugene. It really laying the groundwork for what I want to do with Eugene and his affiliation with Matt Striker. And I definitely really have plans for what I'm going to do with them going forward in the year. Now, the fourth match I have on the card is the match that they did in actuality, which was Chris Masters taking on Carlito. Now, the build-up would be slightly a bit different. Now, in reality, when I watched the Raw after WrestleMania 22 when this incident happened, they basically had Carlito attack Chris Masters all of a sudden, and Chris Masters won a match against a local jobber, and then Carlito ended up attacking Chris Masters, and at the time I was very confused as to who was going to be the face, who was the heel. I don't know, it just kind of felt very confusing because they were cheering Carlito despite, doing something very heelish. But here's what I'm going to do a bit differently here. Now, if you refer back to my previous video when I was booking WrestleMania, what I had was the Money in the Bank qualifying matches to consist of wrestlers who will end up competing in the six-man ladder match at WrestleMania. So they had to go through like a qualifying round on Raw and SmackDown. And basically I had Rob Van Dam defeat Chris Masters, despite Carlito's attempts to help Chris Masters, which ends up backfiring and thus allowing RVD to enter the Money in the Bank ladder match instead of Chris Masters. And this kind of leads to sort of a jealousy between Chris Masters and Carlito, because Carlito ended up winning his own Money in the Bank qualifying round, and he's just really envious over Carlito and how he feels that WrestleMania is nothing without the masterpiece, and it just hurts him inside just to have to miss out WrestleMania, not to compete at the biggest stage of them all, and to see Carlito being one of the contestants in the ladder match to steal the show, quote unquote, just really has been eating up Chris Masters. Like, he hasn't really been able to sleep all night. It gets to the point where Chris Masters ends up betraying his partner. Carlito argues, I just had to help because he'll do anything to be on top. But come to think of it, that applies to me also, and there can only be one that can reach that mountain first. Carlito ends up going over just like how he did, backstabber, utilizing rope leverage, 1, 2, 3. Carlito successfully goes over Chris Masters in the process. Now we get to the World Tag Team Championship bout. And what I would have here is the Big Show and Kane would still be the World Tag Team Champions going into this show. And they'll be defending the belts against the recently reunited D-Generation X, Shawn Michaels, Triple H. They're still coming off hot of that WrestleMania performance against Shane and Vince McMahon. The Chicago crowd just went crazy, hopefully, at that, given that DX is back and stronger than ever. And because of the overwhelming popularity of Shawn Michaels and Triple H, Big Show and Kane have expressed interest in putting their belts on the line against the two degenerates. Vince McMahon is initially against this due to his hostility towards Shawn and Triple H. But Big Show and Kane go on to explain that back during the fall of 2005, just before Eric Bischoff got fired by Vince McMahon, is that when they became tag team champions, Big Show and Kane had a compromise with Eric Bischoff that if they happened to win the tag team titles, that when they become tag team champions, that they could decide to pick on whoever opponent to choose to challenge them for the tag team gold. And because of that ironclad contract, Vince is just kind of left with really nothing else for him to overrule that decision. But regardless, the Big Show and Kane defend their World Tag titles against Shawn Michaels and Triple H. And D-Generation X will go over the Big Show and Kane and become your new World Tag Team Champions. Now we get to the doubleheader of Backlash, and the first of the two matches that I'll be mentioning would involve the winner-take-all match between the Intercontinental Champion Shelton Benjamin taking on Mr. Money in the Bank Rob Van Dam. And basically they did this match at the actual Backlash card as well. Now, RVD and Shelton Benjamin were both involved in the Money in the Bank ladder match. RVD successfully retrieved the briefcase. Shelton Benjamin came so close into winning that 6-man ladder match. It just really eats him up inside that he just was unable to retrieve the Money in the Bank briefcase. In a backstage interview, Shelton Benjamin blames RVD for the reason why he failed to win the match. 2 years since branching out as a solo competitor, he has spent all his time busting his ass off competing against the top premier athletes. As a 2-time Intercontinental Champion, Shelton believes that he's a heartbeat away from achieving his goal to become the WWE Champion, but yet he feels that there's an obstacle blocking this path. Shelton quotes, "Rob Van Dam, whether you're the whole effing show, Mr. Money Night, or Mr. Money in the Bank, however you want to refer to yourself as, I would like for you to prove that you live up to those monikers if I could offer just simply one favor. How about at Backlash, you and I go on one-on-one in just a traditional pure wrestling contest? I will more than gladly put my championship belt up for grabs if you also put something else up on the line. your Money in the Bank briefcase. So RVD agrees to put his Money in the Bank briefcase up on the line, while Shelton Benjamin agrees to put the IC title belt on the line, so that the winner of that match would not only have the Money in the Bank briefcase, but they will also have the Intercontinental title as well. Now, even also to add a extra layer in the build to this match, I did find out that Charlie Haas had returned, or was just about to make his return to the WWE at this time. And I would have Shelton Benjamin say that he would invite his family members to watch him wrestle against RVD at Backlash. So he provides his family with front row seat tickets. We would have Todd Grisham, even at some point during Backlash, during an intermission segment of sorts, having Todd Grisham interview with Charlie Haas. It's like, there's been speculation that you've been expressing interest in returning to wrestle here in the WWE. Charlie Haas gets this interview and he makes a response that the only thing for sure is that nothing's for sure. Before you know it, maybe I will be wrestling in the WWE once again. I mean, I want to see my best friend Shelton Benjamin. We've been together on the road over the years. We were tag team champions, and I look forward to see Shelton Benjamin tear the house down and walk out of that match. Not only still your Intercontinental champion, but also Mr. Money in the Bank. And I want to see my best friend succeed. So Shelton Benjamin, he has his family members sitting at front row, as well as Charlie Haas, who will be watching the match unfold. It plays out primarily the same as what we saw, but then towards the end of the match, Shelton Benjamin at some point has RVD beat. Shelton Benjamin goes for a T-bone. He tries to pin RVD. 1, 2, Rob Van Dam out of nowhere just kicks out at near fall. Shelton Benjamin is just completely like in shock and awe because he felt that he should have won that match. Especially using that T-bone suplex as his finish. And Shelton Benjamin is just really like, man, what am I gonna do? It's like no matter how much I try, RVD just keeps kicking out. Now that's kind of the thought process that Shelton Benjamin is having. It's not something he would actually say, but that's kind of how his thought process is going, especially during that match as far as his reaction is concerned. Charlie Haas at some point tries to get Shelton Benjamin. He's like, come over here, and he's just gesturing him to, provide some advice and try to influence Shelton Benjamin into resorting to using underhanded tactics, which kind of really pisses off Shelton Benjamin. It's like, no, I don't want to do this. It's like, I don't want to cheat my way out. I want to beat RVD fair and square. And he's trying to influence Shelton Benjamin to utilize either the Intercontinental Championship belt or the Money in the Bank briefcase, and to allow Shelton Benjamin to win the match. But Shelton Benjamin is not that type of wrestler to cheat in the match, But because of all that falling out between Shelton and Charlie, this allows RVD to get back on the offense. Shelton Benjamin hesitantly takes the Money in the Bank briefcase. RVD uses the Van Daminator on the briefcase, goes for the 5-star frog splash. 1, 2, 3. RVD is not only still your Mr. Money in the Bank, but he is now your new Intercontinental Champion. Shelton and Charlie are kind of still bickering at each other, and Shelton's just so frustrated that he had to listen to Charlie Haas. He ended up coming up short in that match. And now, not only did Shelton Benjamin not retrieve the Money in the Bank briefcase, but now he's no longer Intercontinental Champion, and he is just so pissed. And he even tries to attack Charlie Haas, and the referee's just trying to restrain Shelton Benjamin. This plays out the same as how we saw it, just adding a little bit of suspense going into this match. I mean, even though RVD won, but Shelton Benjamin is going to have a storyline that will follow up on it, so it's not just used as a way to put over RVD, but it's also a way to put over Shelton Benjamin. It's like, even though he came up short in the match, so it kind of gives a direction with Shelton Benjamin, which, WWE just severely underutilized Shelton Benjamin in 2006. But hopefully, this will benefit both guys in the long run, and I very much look forward to pushing both guys. Last but not least, this will be a triple threat match for the WWE Championship. Edge will be going in to defend the belt against Ric Flair and John Cena. This is a summary of everything that's been going on for the past 4 to 5 months. Edge and Ric Flair had their tension going into the tail end of 2005, basically parroting Ric Flair and the traffic incident that was going on. This led to a series of matches at New Year's Revolution, where Edge clubs Ric Flair with the briefcase, causing him to do a blade job that has Ric Flair's face just covered entirely in blood. Then at the Royal Rumble, they had the TLC match. Edge ended up going over Ric Flair and retaining the WWE Championship. Also at New Year's Revolution, something I also missed out. But Edge cashed in his money in the bank and challenged John Cena and won the WWE title from John Cena, taking him out of action subsequently. And WrestleMania, Edge defeated John Cena and getting his WrestleMania moment, having that opportunity to main event the grandest stage of them all. Now, this all kind of comes together as this anticipated main event, which would be basically similar to what we saw in actuality, but except here, instead of Triple H, I have Ric Flair in that role. In the weeks leading in the Backlash, Edge announces that 2006 has been a strong year for the Rated R superstar. There's hardly anyone in the locker room that could be on par with him. When it comes to being the top guy on Monday Night Raw, there's no such thing as being the number 2 or the number 3 guy. In terms of being a WWE champion, the belt solidifies without question that Edge is the face that runs the place. Take that, AJ Styles. No, I'm playing. But Edge quotes, "Whether you fans love me or you hate me, let me know that I am the champion that you should all respect." And Cena, you want to talk about hustle, loyalty, and respect? Take a look at all these fans, because apparently it doesn't seem like they respect you at all. And this would be the night after WrestleMania 22, still held in Chicago, so I would think that the Chicago crowd would still boo John Cena regardless of how I've been booking him. Now, John Cena will come out to rant about how Edge had to cheat in the match to walk out with the championship belt, and he even acknowledges the negative crowd reaction, but decides to respond to his comment. "Edge, you may have won, but I'm not going to give up my title opportunity after what you and Lita did to me. Not only did you screw me out of the title belt twice, but you went out your way to dispose the spinner belt that I carried around my shoulders week in and week out. And that ain't cool, bro. Since Lita had the nerve to cost me the match, bottom line is that you couldn't even fight me like a man." On cue, Ric Flair's music hits as he chimes in on the conversation. And what does this talk about being a man, you ask? When it comes to championship belts, it represents the blood, sweat, and tears that any superstar has worked hard to earn. So this is basically what Ric Flair has been saying. "John Cena, that championship belt you carried around your waist at one point was nothing but a toy that my child could buy at Toys R Us. I'm not the kind of guy who prefers buying items that are cheap or inexpensive. When it comes to being the man, we all know that you have to beat the man. And I think it's about time that I demonstrate exactly what I mean." As Flair prepares for a fight, our Raw general manager, the chairman of WWE, Vince McMahon, addresses the issues surrounding the 3 competitors. Given the circumstances that have happened over the past several months, I have an announcement to make at the April pay-per-view Backlash. You, Edge, will defend the WWE Championship not against one, but two superstars in that very ring. The 16-time world champion and the nature boy Ric Flair, as well as the Doctor of Dogonomics, the former WWE champion John Cena, in a triple threat match. And so the match is announced as your main event for Backlash. John Cena is going to come out with the steel chain during this entrance. And announcers actually make a big deal out of this because John Cena, it's been such a long time since John Cena's been carrying out that steel chain. If you remember during his run on SmackDown, and basically used to come out to wearing that steel chain around his neck. And it turns out that John Cena is going to do what it takes to win back the WWE Championship and, really showing a lot more aggression that he's been showing since he came back from his little 1-month hiatus. I mean, he's still babyface, but you could really tell that he's just not being like a very light-hearted kind of guy that he tends to be. But John Cena, especially during the weeks leading into Backlash, he'll be competing in televised matches. He'd be showing a lot more overconfidence, a little cocky, a lot more brash and arrogant. And John Cena is starting to, he has this, he has the STF as his submission move that he was already doing at this time. We will have John Cena win his matches using the STF as opposed to the FU. And even if John Cena does execute the FU at any point during a match, whether it be going against someone like Rob Conway or like a Gene Snitsky, like basically undercard wrestlers that weren't really being utilized. So we would have John Cena basically win those matches. But the thing here is that John Cena, even if he executes the FU, he's going to try and go for a cover, but he'd just be toying around his opponents and beating him up like a dead horse. And then Cena would lock the STF. He'll be applying as much pressure as he can. His opponent taps out. John Cena still has that hold locked in. He's like this sort of ravaged animal in a way, in like a Ken Shamrock kind of way, or like Kurt Angle towards the end of his WWE run, like someone that you can't really control, and the referees would like all come out there to insist John Cena to release the hold, but John Cena wouldn't. And that's kind of what we're gonna do with John Cena going into Backlash. He's really starting to become more and more like this a lion that can't be tamed, I guess you could say. Towards the end, we'll have John Cena utilize the steel chain, and basically he's stalking on Ric Flair and Edge, but particularly Edge, really. John Cena is going to stalk on Edge, and basically he has the chain wrapped around his fists. And he looks to set his target out on Edge, but Edge moves out of the way and clubs Ric Flair instead with the steel chain. Cena's kind of in shock because his plan didn't go the way that he wanted to. Edge is going to utilize that moment to bounce back off the ropes, delivers a spear on John Cena. 1, 2, 3. Edge is still your WWE champion. He and Lita go on to celebrate and walk up the aisle in celebration. That's basically my main event for Backlash, the triple threat match, which would be just as entertaining as the actual triple threat match in reality. Thank you all guys for watching this video. Stay tuned as I will be covering Chapter 6. I'll be tackling the SmackDown May pay-per-view Judgment Day. So stick around if you're still interested. Just please leave down your comments in the comment section below. Tell me what your thoughts are regarding this pay-per-view card. And if there's some things that you would do differently, leave down your thoughts in the comment section below. And until then, this is the Gold Standard Caesar 924 signing out.